Three gaffers are being linked to the unavailable West Ham United manager's job, and they are Roberto Mancini, Brendan Rodgers and Graham Potter. We're going to deal with the latter two first because ex-West Ham employee provided an update over on the West Ham Way Patreon yesterday, and it stated, "We asked a top source at the club his opinions on both Brendan Rodgers and Graham Potter. The opinions seemed to be positive on Brendan Rodgers, who was described as a decent manager. The feedback was not so good on Potter, with a top source within the club stating the general feeling is he was massively helped with his recruitment at the club, that being Brighton, by his backroom staff, and that his time at Brighton may have given people an inaccurate perception of the manager." It was also stated there's no evidence that they would be better than David Moyes. So that was the update from ex-West Ham employee on Rodgers and Potter, from what the club are saying. And we're going to start with Graham Potter on this one. And I actually don't necessarily disagree with anything that the club have told ex-West Ham employee there. Was he helped by the recruitment team at Brighton? Absolutely yes, of course he was. That is what makes Brighton good. That recruitment team is a big part of the reason Brighton are successful. So of course Graham Potter was helped by that. What about his backroom staff? Again, yes, but Graham Potter put that backroom staff in place. So it feels weird to discredit a manager because of his backroom staff. That's surely a good thing. If a manager has a really good backroom staff, that's got to be a plus point for attracting that manager, because usually they'll take them with them. You don't just appoint the manager, you appoint the team. So to say that Potter had the advantage of a really good backroom staff, it seems a bit of a strange one for me to use it as a stick against the manager. I look at it completely different. I think that's a really good thing for the manager to have in his locker. And then the last one, which was that people have an inaccurate perception of Graham Potter. I think that's unfair because everybody has a different perception of Graham Potter. Some people will rate him really highly. Some people think he's really poor, like the Chelsea players. We've all heard what they've been calling him, haven't they? Bit harsh, but people's perception of Graham Potter varies. So I think to say that people have had an inaccurate one because of Brighton, how can you get an accurate one? He was there for years. That's a silly one. I'm not buying that one at all. My perception is he's a good manager. He plays good football. That's it. Not excellent, not world class or anything like that. He was a good manager who played good football, and he did a good job at Brighton. The jump up to Chelsea was a little bit chaotic, wasn't it? I think it was poison chalice, really. I don't think he was ever going to succeed there, especially when you see how they handled the January transfer window. You hear the stories now that, you know, in training there was people had to sit on the floor for the team meetings because there wasn't enough seats because there's that many players. So I think sometimes a big squad is a big problem, and I think that's the case at Chelsea. I don't think you can judge Potter on what he did at Chelsea. I think you can judge him on what he did at Brighton, and that was a good job. But herein lies the problem. The gig at Brighton is completely different to the gig at West Ham United. Now, what the top source at West Ham said there was Potter was helped by his recruitment team. That worries me. That worries me a lot. To me, that's an admission of guilt. That's almost an admission of our recruitment team's not that good. What Brighton do over there, scouting, identifying, purchasing, what they do, we can't do that, West Ham. We are incapable. We're not that good. That is a chairman, in my eyes, a chairman who's been at this club for a long time now. Okay, Potter is described as a project manager. Personally, I find it a little bit harsh, but we'll deal with that in a second. Talking about a project, well, David Sullivan's had long enough to do the project at West Ham. He's had long enough to put that recruitment team in place. We've only just started putting one together, and at the minute, jury's still out as to whether it's good or not. But Sullivan should have faith in it. Me and you, we can have reservations over Rob Newman and the team there as to whether they're good enough at identifying players and bringing them to the club. We can have that sort of wariness. We are allowed that. But as the person that's paying their wages, that's employed them, he shouldn't have that. He should have confidence in his recruitment team. He should look at what he did at Brighton, Graham Potter, and think, you know what? Our recruitment team can give you what you had at Brighton. Rob Newman and that team, they're good enough. Mark Noble, he will be good enough as a sporting director. If not, he shouldn't really be there. But Sullivan should have confidence in all his staff, in the infrastructure that he has created at this club. So this whole Brighton had a good recruitment team, I'm sorry, yes, he did. But that's on you that you don't have that at West Ham. That's your fault, David Sullivan. You're the one that has created this. So to use it, again, to use it as a stick to beat Potter with, actually, give me that stick and let's hit Sullivan with it, because you should have that recruitment process in place already at this football club. So the fact that you look at it as a reason to not employ Potter, well, shame on you actually, because that means you've not done your job as a chairman to have that infrastructure ready to go get a manager in that can actually do something like he's done at Brighton. And it's really frustrated me actually hearing that excuse as to why we can't get Potter, because that is, to me, that's a chairman saying our recruitment team's not that good. Now, there is the possibility that he sees Brighton doing it differently to West Ham. He thinks we're doing a really good job. Brighton are doing a really good job. We just do things differently. But I'm not convinced. I think it's the other one, which is Brighton do better than us. And we don't have that here. As if it's someone else's fault other than his own. As for the project part of Graham Potter, I guess this is potentially one problem. Because, like I said, I think it's a little bit harsh. But he would require time. He would require a lot of time and possibly a lot of funding as well. We don't know if the funding's available. We don't even know who will be the owners come August, so we'll have to wait and see. But in terms of time, the managers at West Ham under the current regime haven't really been given time and funding. Sometimes to get one or the other. Allardyce had a decent bit of time but didn't really get the money. Pellegrini got the money but didn't really get the time. David Moyes has had a little bit of both. Well, he's had a lot of money. He's had a decent bit of time. So it would require patience. Now, I know I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty here because I don't like what Moyes is doing. I don't have time for Moyes. I don't like the Moyes project. I don't like it. So I'm part of the problem here. This impatience I'm away to talk about. I fall into that category. But what I would argue is the difference between David Moyes and Graham Potter is I don't mind watching Graham Potter's football. It's very possession based. It's not for everyone, Gonzo. But I do think it's attractive enough. It's bearable. So when you're not winning games, you can still enjoy the actual football that's on display. You can see what he's trying to do. You can see the ethos, the identity. He has an identity for a start, but you can see the identity that he's trying to create within the team. Whereas with David Moyes, I'm not really sensing that. The football is not good. It's not enjoyable. I don't look forward to watching it. And that's the big difference between the two. So that's why I could have patience with Graham Potter, but perhaps don't have with David Moyes. The biggest problem with Graham Potter, though, and this worries me again, the fact that this wasn't mentioned by, I keep saying by David Sullivan, by the top source at West Ham when an West Ham employee reached out to him or her. He never said anything about the fact that, I mean, he does say Graham Potter's backroom staff, but he could have elaborated on that if this is what he means. But they're unavailable. Graham Potter has been sacked. The staff he took with him from Brighton to Chelsea are still at Chelsea. That's a problem. That is a big, big problem. Because like I said, when you employ a manager, you tend to employ his staff as well. Usually they come with him, or at least a handful of people. If West Ham were to go and employ Potter tomorrow, or Leicester City, where apparently they were trying to, and Potter said, no, I need a break, understandably. The problem is, well, who else do you want? Well, I'd like this guy, this guy, and this guy, but they're all currently at Chelsea in big, expensive contracts. So if you want them, it's going to cost you a lot of money. They're in charge of the game tonight against Liverpool. So Bruno and all that are still at Chelsea. Now, they've been asked about their future, and it's been very vague, which is we don't really know yet. Is it going to be at Chelsea under the new manager? Are we going to get sacked? Or are we going to quit? We don't really know yet. I imagine they're waiting for Graham Potter to do something, and then they'll decide whether to go with Potter or they're going to risk it with a new manager should be given an opportunity. But Potter's backroom staff is currently unavailable. Well, if they're available, it'll just cost you a lot of money to get them out of Chelsea. They will not be able to come cheap. Chelsea paid a lot of money for them and Potter, so it'll be difficult. So now, Matt Law did an article last night and said that West Ham would be interested in Graham Potter in the summer, and I think that's more believable. I think any manager that was discussing today or onwards really would be a summer appointment. Matt Law at the Telegraph stated that West Ham will reevaluate David Moyes' position in the summer, and should they dismiss him, Graham Potter could be a possibility, and I think that would be the wise thing. I think a summer appointment for Potter or a other manager would be a good one. Now, I'll be honest with you, Potter, I'm lukewarm. I'm okay with it. If we got him in, great, but I wouldn't expect miracles, for example. It would be an okay appointment as far as I'm concerned. Brendan Rodgers, on the other hand, yes, please. Now, I'm going to defend Brendan Rodgers here. Despite how crap Leicester have been this season, and they have been crap, he deserved the sack. There's no two ways about it. But I'm a big Brendan Rodgers fan. Long-term subscribers of this channel, and I mean long-term, will know I wanted him when he was at Celtic. Would have loved him, was gutted when he went to Leicester and we didn't make a move for him. And I think he's done a really, really good job at Leicester overall. This season, not so much. Prior to that, fantastic. Won the cup, 5th place consecutive finishes in the league, followed by an 8th place, I think, off the top of my head. But there's been problems at Leicester City. Do you know how much they've spent? Do you know how much Leicester City have spent? 60 million. Net spend 60 million. Oh no, not this season. In the last 5 seasons combined, they've spent a net of 60 million. There's no surprise Brendan Rodgers has struggled in that job when you look at the transfer spending, when you look at the transfer for activity this season as well. But they've spent 60 million. That's a championship budget. And he's kept them in good positions until this one. It's all fell apart this season, but prior to that, he was doing well with quite a small budget. Now, it doesn't mean he's not spent money. The net spend, so he could spend a lot. It just means he's taken in a lot of money at the same time as well. But I think he's done really well. This season, though, the summer was a disaster. No money to spend. Kasper Schmeichel left. They gambled with Danny Ward. Bad mistake in hindsight. Wesley Fofana wanted to go. It was quite late in the window. He went and came right fast, who I think's done okay. He looks really good some games, a liability others, but regardless, he's not as good as Wesley Fofana. Yuri Tielemans running down his contract, that's not going to be helpful whatsoever. They've always got injuries. Whenever I watch Leicester, there's always at least 2 players missing from that starting 11 every single game. James Justin appears to be out forever. Ricardo Pereira is out more than he is in. Johnny Evans is absent for a while. There's always players missing. He's relying on Mark Albrighton, for crying out loud. You know, he's been there and done that, and he's been a fantastic servant to Leicester City, but he's still relying on Mark Albrighton in 2023. So injuries have been a big problem. Availability has been a big problem for them. I actually think one of Brendan Rodgers' biggest issues has been Jamie Vardy. Jamie Vardy is such a unique striker. Now, I actually thought they had the perfect replacement for him. Patson Daka came in. I thought, wow, I'd love him at West Ham. Terrific signing. Plays off the shoulder of defence. He's got that pace that Vardy has. Like for like, almost. It's not worked out whatsoever. It's not been a flop per se, but he's just not been as good. He hasn't fitted in like you would expect him to, or you'd have hoped him to. Iheanacho has some good spells. The end of last season, unbelievable. But he doesn't have that creativity that Jamie Vardy had. He isn't quite the same player. And I think despite Daka and Iheanacho being really good strikers on their own, they're not Jamie Vardy. And I think that's a big problem. They've got this Jamie Vardy hole at the top of their team. And, you know, like I said, they've seen it coming. They knew they had to replace him. They got Daka in. Iheanacho was there. It's just not worked out, unfortunately. And it's very similar to Moyes with Michail Antonio. Now, I'm not comparing Antonio to Vardy in terms of ability. I'm talking about the role created at West Ham as a striker is so unique. And Antonio is a unique player. Vardy's a unique player as well. And I think with Scamacca, with Danny Ings, we've just struggled. In Sebastian Haller to some extent, Moyes has really struggled to play somebody there that isn't Michail Antonio. And I think Rodgers has had an element of that at Leicester City. Without Jamie Vardy, rather, he's really struggled. Now, this season has been an absolute disaster for them. But I like the way Rodgers plays football. I've always been a big fan of the brand of football Rodgers plays. I quite like him as a personality. I quite like listening to his post-match interviews. I remember when they thumped Southampton, when Southampton gave their annual 9-0 defeat or whatever it was against Leicester. Just listening to him after the game, and he was speaking about, you know, Chilwell, Maddison, Vardy, and he was speaking about the arrogance he wants them to play with, not cockiness, that arrogance, and about how important the line was, kind of thing. And I just liked hearing that. I thought, you know what, I'm buying into this kind of thing. I would love Brendan Rodgers at West Ham. He will do well, depends where he goes, but relative success, I imagine Rodgers will succeed at his next club, which will be a Premier League club, because he will get another Premier League job next season. I would love it to be at West Ham. It's not the project that Graham Potter would bring. Do I see, if we employed Rodgers now, could I see him here in 5 years? Possibly not. But I think short term, I think it would be a lot more enjoyable. And I just like him as a manager. And if he could get the backing, which Moyes has had, which Pellegrini's had, you just don't know what he could do, because he's not necessarily had that at Leicester. Yes, like I said, he's had some big signings that haven't all worked out. But 60 million net spend over 5 years for a Premier League club, especially one that's been in the Premier League the whole time. It's not like Fulham, who've gone down and come back up again or anything like that. They've been in that Premier League consecutively. They've had European football as well to help boost the finances of the club. that's very, very little money to spend for Premier League club, and I think he's done a really good job. At the end of the day, he has won an FA Cup. Yes, when I listened to Gonzo's video last night, and he was right in the sense that we can't then dismiss Moyes' achievements but then use it for Rodgers. Actually, I think you can, because Rodgers did actually win a trophy. Moyes didn't actually win a trophy. I think the two is huge. I think you have to take into consideration that Rodgers did win them the FA Cup, but you have to. The last one, Roberto Mancini, won't go into it too much, but the Italian press are reporting that Mancini is open to a move to the Premier League and West Ham could be that club. But Mancini is apparently looking for an ambitious project, but also wants 8 million a year. Not sure which it is, well, both obviously, greedy bugger. He wants the ambitious project and 8 million. Can we afford him? Probably. It's a lot of money, but we could afford him. Do we have the ambitious project? Depends what he considers to be ambitious. What I would suggest is, if the Mancini one was true, which I'm taking with a pinch of salt, by the way, but if it was true, hypothetically, I think it would indicate there's perhaps not going to be a change of ownership this summer. Because remember, after Slaven Bilic, Sullivan wanted Mancini. We talk about how Sullivan wanted Rafa Benitez back then. We ended up with David Moyes. He also really wanted Mancini. Remember, Mancini rocked up at the London Stadium. Sullivan practically dragged him into the director's box. Said, "Here, sit down and watch the game." And then he went to a Premier League game later on in the week as well. Just to say, I'm just going around England watching Premier League football. But he was definitely at a West Ham game. We definitely wanted Mancini, but we didn't get him. We ended up with David Moyes. So there is something there. There is a little bit of history. Whereas Sullivan's never wanted Potter or Brendan Rodgers, to our knowledge, he has actually wanted Mancini. So we'll have to wait and see. Last thing I will say is Gonzo was right in the video last night, which is Sullivan's always said there's no managers available. That's why we're sticking with Moyes. Well, there's two now, so this is where it gets a little bit interesting. But anyway, I'm going to stop it there. Let me know your thoughts on all three managers in the comments below. Please do drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to Hammers Chat. Myself and Gonzo will catch up with you tomorrow night with the build up to the Newcastle game. I was going to say I'm looking forward to it. I'm not, but I'll see you tomorrow night anyway. Catch you in a bit.